And you know what? If you're 19 years old, if you're 20 years old, you want to stick it to the man. You want to be heterodox and countercultural. That's how we got the rise of wokeism 1.0 in this country, and that's okay. That's behind us. Well, you know what? If you want to be countercultural or heterodox as a young person today, you want to stick it to the man. I got an idea for you. Try calling yourself a conservative. Try saying you want to get married, have kids, raise them to believe in God and pledge allegiance to the flag. Amen. Right? That's countercultural today, and that's okay. That's what young people want to run to. So I want to make faith and family and hard work and patriotism cool again in this country, actually, because I think it is cool. And I think we can do that by reaching the next generation in a way that nobody else in this campaign can. And if you guys do your job and put us in that role, we will do our job to see that through in the 8 years that we lead this country. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. We go back there for one. Wherever you guys want. Yep.
Can you elaborate on your plans to fix the indoctrination of our education systems that's been going on for so long and is so rooted, even as far as in New Hampshire? Because I can tell you from experience, only being 23, it is really bad. It hasn't been education for years. It's only been indoctrination.
It has. So I believe in getting to the root cause. You got to kill the head of the snake. That's the U.S. Department of Education. Okay, they're using $80 billion of our own money to tell local schools that you can't get that federal money unless you adopt toxic indoctrination of racial and gender ideologies. So I say shut it down. Put that $80 billion back in the pockets of parents who get to choose where they send their kids to school. By the way, the failing schools are the ones that spend more per student. Put some of that money in the accounts of those students. Right? Even if you take half the money on a per student basis from a bad school to a good one, which spends less, those kids can graduate with a six-figure graduation gift in their senior year of high school. You tell me what's a better use of money. It's not even close. If you're going to put it on if you're going to teach it in the classroom, put it on the internet. If you don't want to put it on the internet, don't teach it in the classroom. Right? Transparency, choice. Then we have that revival of civic education. Make sure people know something when they graduate from high school. Know the minimums that an immigrant has to become part of this country. That's how we revive our education. Make it about achievement once again, not employment opportunities for teachers who then, and this is where it comes from, blow smoke to deflect accountability. The sad truth is we spent 2 years, a year and a half, telling kids in poor neighborhoods that they couldn't show up to school. Well, somehow, apparently, that COVID thing didn't apply to people who go to private schools or to better charter schools. Somehow it only affects kids in teachers' union beholden public schools. They're worse. I mean, and the reality is, so what do they say? We haven't taught those kids how to do math. Last year, I'm not making these words up, they started saying math is racist. 2 + 2 = 4. No, I'm sorry, that's not racist. But you know what might be inequitable? Failing to teach a bunch of black kids in the inner city and white kids and Hispanic kids too, not how to do math for a year and a half. And then you're blowing woke smoke to provide cover. Sorry, I'm not letting you get away with that. We got to get to the truth and actually achieve for our students. That is our responsibility. Thank you.
My name is Nancy Webb. I live in Hampshire. I'm a nurse. I work at Boston Children's Hospital. I've worked with for 33 years.
Thank you for your, as a nurse.
As a nurse.
Thank you. Let's give her a round of applause. We need more nurses. That's what we do, yeah.
That's what I want to talk to you about. Because I've not heard one candidate. I've heard that there's no air traffic controllers, there's no pilots, there's no nurses. And part of the problem is the college's infrastructure. They only get 300 students. But when they get to the junior year, they only have the lab space, whatever, to accommodate 100.
You're totally right.
And the people are going into the nursing profession because they make more money in the hospitals. And in the hospitals now, we have travel nurses that come in at $100 an hour, when everybody's been working at the hospital makes $50 an hour. And about 25 years ago, we had this thing where we needed nurses, and we were getting them from the Philippines and Ireland. We need to fix this problem ourselves.
In this country.
In this country.
Yes.
And if you have this on your agenda, you'll have the support of doctors, nurses, anyone who's sick, their families, senior citizens. I mean, but not one person has put this on their agenda. It's critical issue. And
Thank you. I appreciate that. What's your name?
Nancy.
Nancy.
And I'm
Nancy, I
trying
appreciate
to
that.
tell somebody this, and thank you for listening, because it's.
I think you're spot on.
I am.
I think you're dead spot on. You see it on the front line. I want to hand it over to Apoorva just so you guys have a chance to hear from her. She, like you, works in the hospital and sees a lot of this on the front line, and then I'll tell you what our view is from a policy perspective after that.
Nancy, thank you so much. That is amazing. So I totally agree with you, and trust me, I've been in his ear. He's heard that from me too. So I wanted to introduce myself a little bit too while I'm here. So I'm Apoorva Ramaswamy. I get to be married to this guy. We have our 2 little kiddos out there, Karthik and Arjun. And I am also working at a hospital. I work at Ohio State as a throat surgeon. And I totally agree. We need nurses. We need nursing assistants. We need PCAs. We need so many people who are actually interacting with other humans and seeing what is going on. And I think that's the problem is, and Vivek's going to touch on this a little bit later, but we don't prioritize education and training for those programs. The Department of Education that we were just talking about does not give you any money to get these essential degrees, the actual jobs that we need in this country. People are not being actually incentivized to fill. And that's really what's going on. And that's in so many parts, not just in healthcare, but in so many industries. Think about everyone who has tried to get a job done. You need plumbers, you need people who build things, you need people who fix things, the people who actually do things in this country. Unfortunately, I love them, but we don't need more software. We need more actual hard-working Americans who can actually fix and build things. So Vivek will talk a little bit about what he's doing to help with that.
And I get this at home from a frontline perspective. I think I'm unique. I'm proud to be a presidential candidate who comes home in the evening and knows that my job during the day wasn't the more important of the pair when I actually hear what Apoorva sees on the front lines. And this is fixable. This is doable. So I think the Department of Education is, again, a big part of the problem, where $80 billion of that money is going to subsidize 4-year college degrees that weren't the right choice for many people who were coaxed into doing it, versus actually supporting those in the trades that help fill a worker shortage in this country. That's a big part of what the next president, Republican or Democrat, can take up, and that's something I'm committed to, is not tilting the scales artificially towards more student debt. Then people say, oh, well, then I can't choose a career in nursing because then I can't pay off the 4-year college degree. You could have gone straight into actually a nursing program or actually an assistant program to be a PA or a technician, many of whom were lacking as well in hospitals across this country. That in turn is how you actually contribute to bringing down healthcare costs in this country. Because when you have that shortage, the cost then goes up. That's passed on to the consumer. And I think this is one of the areas which should rise beyond partisanship. The bureaucracy and the way in which the bureaucracy has tilted the scales, not just in education, but in healthcare, is contributing directly to increases in healthcare costs. I grew up in healthcare. Healthcare industry was where I began my career as an entrepreneur. Apoorva as a physician. If there's one topic we're uniquely passionate about, it is about actually delivering better health outcomes by actually improving the quality of people who are able to enter the profession like you. So I appreciate that, and I thank you for that question. Great question. Thank you. We got someone back there. Well, why don't I come? Oh, there you go.
So, sorry, I'm nervous. I'm new to your platform, so I don't know where you stand on this issue. But we're seeing an increasing problem in Congress and all different sections of government with age terms. A few examples we can obviously point out, but I want to know what your position is on term limits and age limits.
So I'll be very clear. I believe in answering questions directly, and then I'll get to what I think is even more important. I don't favor age limits because I think it's up to the people to determine who governs. Okay. Now, you could point to a lot of older people who might not be totally with it, but you can actually have a lot of old people who are smart as a tack. You got people like John Fetterman, who would have passed an age requirement, who I don't think is fit to serve, and I don't hold that against him. I feel badly for him that a managerial class puts up these puppets that in some ways, if you want to know what's going on, it's not like an accident. The less mentally competent you are, the more effective you are as a puppet and an instrument for the administrative state and the donor class. And so even what we see with many of these people, it looks like elder abuse for a reason. The people who are abusing them are really a machine that are just putting up these politicians as pawns. I do favor term limits. 3 terms for Congress, 2 terms for the U.S. Senate. I've signed the term limit pledge. And I think that keeps the lifeblood fresh in this country. I'm also going to be honest with you. That would require a constitutional amendment. So I don't want to make false promises to tell you that's something I can definitely get done. The promises I make, I will keep. Here's a promise I will make and I will keep. A different kind of term limit. Term limits for the people who work in the bureaucracy. So think about this is, if I can't work for you, and that is the relationship I'm asking for, I'm in a job interview right now. If I can't work for you all, the taxpayer, for more than 8 years, which I think is a good thing, then neither should any of those federal bureaucrats either who report into me. And that I can get done without a constitutional amendment, without asking Congress for permission or for forgiveness. And that's the most important kind of term limit, because it's the bureaucracy that's wielding power today that's really the source of cancer in the federal government. That much I will get done by the end of my first term. That's how we revive the lifeblood of this country. It's a great question. I think I'm the only person talking about it, which is why I'm in this race. What do you say? Right there, we got it.
I just have one question. In New Hampshire, we struggling with housing. What are you going to do to fix the housing crisis?
Housing crisis in this country is the question. So it's the same as many other crises in this country. The energy crisis, the housing crisis, the workforce shortage crisis, it all comes back to the same thing. We have to unlock the supply in this country. What is the #1 obstacle to new home builders? Regulation. Including coming on 3-letter agencies from Washington, D.C., including the EPA and their counterparts at the local level. So I believe most of those federal regulations are literally unconstitutional right now. Okay, rescind them. Take a pen and cross it out through it. For those of you who, it's a hot day at a fair, so you don't want a law school lesson here, but I'll go deep for 1 second. The most important Supreme Court case of the last decade is West Virginia versus EPA, which said that several of those EPA regulations are unconstitutional because Congress never gave them the authority. Well, you know what? If that's unconstitutional, most federal regulations are unconstitutional, including those governing home builders today. Get rid of those, we'll have a supply. I know many home builders who are waiting in the wings, ready to proceed on projects where their hands are tied. It's the laws of supply and demand. Once we see the influx of that supply, housing costs and home rental costs will come down in this country. That falls directly at the feet of the government. The other thing is the energy required to build and power those homes. We got to go back to drilling, fracking, burning coal, and embracing nuclear energy. Forget the climate cult. Abandon it. We are done with it. I'm not bending the knee to this anti-carbon religion. Goodbye. We embrace American prosperity. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. We'll take a couple more and then we'll wrap up. Right behind you there.
Yeah, hey, my name is Robbie. I asked a question about Rule 6 on your board there, where you say that parents determine the education of their children. But then recently I saw you also posted on your Instagram saying how children should be banned under the age of 16 from social media. And I was just wondering what your opinion is on how that could affect them being able to explore their own ideas or their own thoughts.
Great question.
All they could see is maybe what they see from their government or from their parents.
Great question. So, look, here's the way I look at it. It's a very specific view I have on algorithmically powered social media that has an addictive tendency greater than cigarettes or alcohol. And I'm an extreme pro-freedom and pro-individual choice person for adults. Kids aren't the same as adults. And so for so long as we're saying kids can't smoke an addictive cigarette till 18 or 21, or have an addictive drink of alcohol till the age of 21, it is wildly inconsistent to say that those same kids at the age of 13 or 14 can use a social media app that is palpably affecting the state of their mental health. And so if you're a full-grown adult, I basically support you being able to do anything you want to as long as you're not hurting somebody else in the process. But kids aren't the same as adults when it comes to genital mutilation in the form of gender-affirming care. If you're an adult, you can do it. If you're a kid, no, is my answer. Same thing when it comes to algorithmically powered addictive social media, which is also, by the way, where Many kids are getting Percocet laced with fentanyl. As we speak right now, Snapchat's the place where they get it. Much of the child trafficking issue that's coming up again in this country is coming up set up through people who are predators through addictive social media. And so I just draw a line to say that, okay, if you're an adult, you're fully grown, you're free to decide how you do it. Now, your question about how do kids explore ideas on their own, I think there's something about being a young person in a free country that actually allows you and gives you the power to do that. Part of what I worry about is even in social media, we see the opposite of that. Right? There's a filter that says you aren't exposed to ideas that the regime does not want you to see. That's how you get to government tech censorship. So I embrace the ideals that you do, but I think it's a double negative, where in the name of freedom, of exploring your ideas, you're only served up what the regime allows you to see. And yet with addictive tendencies that I think in many cases palpably affect the mental health of kids long before they have the ability to stand on their own 2 feet. But that is a thoughtful and outstanding question. It took me a long time of iteration and conviction as a freedom-loving person to get to that place in drawing the line between kids and adults. And I do think that, I don't even call these rules, right? This is what I view as core principles that we'll say in private that we just ought to be able to state in public, that yes, parents, not the government, should be the ones responsible for determining the education of their children. I also love your hat, which is of the company that I founded, one of the companies co-founded, Strive, to compete with the likes of BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. That's a big part of how we revive our economy, too, is unshackle ourselves from the orthodoxies imposed by those ESG actors, using our own retirement funds to do it. And so in general, we need to take the shackles off, start thinking independently. That's who we are as Americans. Make sure kids are in a place where they can do that, and once they are, great. It's an independent, thought-driven country. That's who we are as Americans, and that's what we got to stand for. Thank you for that. We'll take one more question, and then we'll wrap it up.
Hi, my name's David. If two people go to see your wife for a treatment, depending upon which insurance company they have, your wife will make a different amount of money. Why? And the government runs 9 different health insurance plans, from Medicare, Medicaid to active duty, VA system, retired reserve, retired active duty, overseas gives a completely different reimbursement rate. Why don't doctors just list the lowest cash price the day the services are rendered? Insurance companies pay them the day the services are rendered. In New York, you cut 40%, New York State, you cut 40% off the price of your health care bill that way. In New Hampshire, that's illegal. You can't do it. So,
and you know why it's illegal? Because it actually helps the people who are in power, the insurance companies that lobbied for that regulation.
I'll give you an example. I paid a bill for $150 for a lab visit, right? The insurance company knocked it down to $5. That means poor people without insurance got billed $150. I only had to pay $5 at the end of the day. Why doesn't everybody get to pay the $5 bill? Because the government says doctors can only charge the same amount of money to the same people on the same day. Doesn't mean every doctor in the United States pays the same amount.
Totally.
Right. But a doctor that sees me and you on the same day should only charge the same price.
It's insane, actually. So I had one of the first things we did in this campaign was for the first few months of this campaign, daily I would have a conversation with a different American. Some people would be famous, some people wouldn't. And it was released in the form of podcasts. One of the guys I sat down with is not somebody who you would have heard of, but he's a doctor in the South, I forget where he's from, who's literally just doing that. All cash pay, forget insurance, and offer the lowest possible price. And it turns out his services actually cost less than just the portion of the out-of-pocket insurance costs that you're supposed to pay for his visits. It's that backwards. It doesn't make any sense. So here's a blueprint for how we fix healthcare in this country. The centralization of insurance in the form of CMS, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, is in this case the head of the snake, the equivalent of the Department of Education, that when I talk about educational reform, that's CMS here. My general philosophy is dismantle the bureaucracy, shake out the savings, put the money back in the pockets of people who need it. Do that in education for poor parents who can't afford to send their kids to private schools on their own and are trapped in the school district they're born in. Same thing in healthcare. Dismantle the bureaucracy of CMS. This shakes up enough money to put money in the hands of people who can't afford private health insurance to just buy private health insurance through the market. And we know that works because we actually have within the government, I mean, it's this goofy thing they have, but there's something to learn from it. You got Medicare, which most people who are eligible for Medicare are on, and then you've got this other thing called Medicare Advantage, which less than a third of people even know about or take advantage of. But Medicare Advantage is like a lump sum payment that allows you to buy the equivalent of private health insurance. I want to be crystal clear. One of the companies I founded was in this space of trying to improve Medicare Advantage. And so I know something about this. Medicare Advantage is badly broken, but it is light years ahead in its effectiveness and cost relative to centralized Medicare. So even if this tiny step to a second worst system is that much more of an improvement, go miles further in that direction. Literally dismantle the bureaucracy, send those people home, tell them to find honest work in the private sector. Put that money in the hands of people who can't afford private health insurance. Make private health insurance competitive. Get them out of the lobbying business that they're in. That's why they lobby in places like New Hampshire to stop it. This is how you bring down healthcare costs and improve effectiveness in this country. And I gotta tell you, we love New Hampshire because we get real questions. Right? Was it Nancy? From Nancy, what's your name? David? We get into the meat, and I love you guys for this because you guys can tell the difference, I think, from somebody who's offering poll-tested platitudes and somebody who's sharing their honest convictions. We would rather lose this election and speak the truth at every step of the way than to win by playing some careful game of political snakes and ladders. That's not worth it. You guys have got the pick, but we think that's going to be the strategy that allows us to be successful. But this isn't about me. This isn't about any other candidate. This is about us, we the people. America First is bigger than one man. It is bigger than me. It is bigger than Trump. It is bigger than Reagan. It belongs to the people of this country. And the thing I will say that maybe is a little bit different than some of my peers in this race, then maybe isn't a little different than where I was 2 years ago in my own thinking. If you read my second book, I don't know if anybody's read Nation of Victims, but I was in a pretty dark place when I wrote that book. It was all about whether we are ancient Rome. Halfway through the book, I said, no, maybe we're not Rome. Maybe we're more like Carthage, because Rome lasted 2,000 years, and we only lasted for a couple hundred. That's where I was. But the path to conviction in our country, I think, runs through doubt. Okay, so if you all are going through doubt about our country, I get it. I feel you. I understand why. I've been through doubt. But I think we get to our conviction on the other side. And so we're taught by both political parties to believe that we're somehow a nation in decline. I don't think we have to be ancient Rome. I don't think we have to be that nation in decline. I think the truth is, as a nation, we are all really just a little young, actually. Going through our own version of adolescence. Figuring out who we're really going to be when we grow up. And when you view it that way, it makes sense again. You go through your teenage years, you go through that identity crisis. You lose your way a little bit. You lose your self-confidence, your sense of who you are. I did. Maybe some of you did too. But we are stronger for it when we get to our adulthood. So no, we don't have to be a nation in decline. I think we are still a nation in our ascent. Maybe the early stages of our ascent. Maybe we're not even yet at base camp on our way to that mountaintop. And maybe we can still yet be that country where we look our kids in the eye and we tell them in good conscience that the United States of America is still that country where no matter who you are, or where your parents came from, or what your skin color is, that you get ahead in this country with your own hard work, your own commitment, your own dedication, and that you know what? You are free to speak your mind at every step of the way. That is the American dream. That is what we are running to. And that is what we together will revive to save our great country. Thank you all. God bless you. God bless your families. And God bless our United States of America. Thank you. Thank you.